welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. The U.S. House of Representatives has impeached President Donald Trump over the Capitol Hill riots. 10 Republicans joined the Democrats to pass the impeachment motion 232 to 197. Trump, charged with incitement of insurrection, has become the first U.S. president to be impeached twice. Pakistan's President Arif Alvi has reaffirmed Islamabad's support for territorial integrity of Azerbaijan. Meeting Azeri Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov in Islamabad, the president underlined the need to expand the volume of bilateral trade and promotion of cultural and commercial cooperation. Bayramov also discussed bilateral ties, regional and international issues with Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi. Britain has asked India to lift all restrictions in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, responding to a debate on the political situation in Kashmir in the Westminster Hall of Parliament. Minister for Asia Nigel Adams said, undoubtedly the situation in Kashmir is of great concern to his government. He added the Kashmir dispute should be resolved according to wishes of Kashmiri people. The United Arab Emirates has ratified the visa exemption agreement with Israel. In a statement, Israel's foreign ministry said now its citizens can visit the UAE without a visa. It added the agreement will come into force within 30 days. Global daily deaths from COVID-19 have passed 17,000 for the first time as the toll approaches 2 million with over 92 million infections. China has reported its first COVID-19 related death in over 8 months, while its daily cases also reached the highest level since July. Meanwhile, U.S.'s death tally has crossed 384,000, while its caseload has surpassed 23 million. Pakistan has registered over 3,000 new cases and 46 deaths overnight as its death toll tops 10,800. And in tennis, fourth-seeded Hubert Hurkacz has won the Delray Beach Open in Florida. The world number 28 beat American Sebastian Korda 6-3, 6-3 in the final. This is the second ATP title for the Polish tennis star and the first since his win at Winston-Salem in 2019. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. Starting off in the United States, the House of Representatives has impeached President Donald Trump over the Capitol Hill riots. Trump, charged with incitement of insurrection, has become the first U.S. president to be impeached twice. This report has more.
Stunned and angered at the Capitol insurrection, U.S. lawmakers lashed out at U.S. President Donald Trump, calling him white supremacist in chief and racist in chief. 10 Republicans joined the Democrats to vote to pass the impeachment motion 232 to 197. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi signed the enforcement of impeachment article.
That Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to our country, and that once again we honored our oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help us God.
Meanwhile, President Trump posted a video on Twitter which did not mention impeachment. Instead, his remarks were focused on Wednesday's Capitol violence, which triggered the incitement of insurrection charge against him. President Trump said he unequivocally condemned the last week's violence.
As I have said, the incursion of the U.S. Capitol struck at the very heart of our republic. It angered and appalled millions of Americans across the political spectrum. I want to be very clear. I unequivocally condemn the violence that we saw last week. Violence and vandalism have absolutely no place in our country and no place in our movement.
The vote was carried out in a large presence of armed National Guard members guarding the outside of the building. About 10,000 National Guard troops have streamed into Washington, D.C. ahead of Joe Biden's inauguration on January 20th. President Trump will now face a trial in GOP-led Senate where, if convicted, he could face being barred from holding the office ever again.
Moving on, Pakistan's President Arif Alvi has reaffirmed Islamabad's support for territorial integrity of Azerbaijan. He said this during a meeting with Azeri Foreign Minister Ceyhan Bayramov in Islamabad. The president congratulated the government and people of Azerbaijan over the liberation of Nagorno-Karabakh. He underlined the need to expand the volume of bilateral trade and promotion of cultural and commercial cooperation. Bayramov thanked Pakistan for supporting Azerbaijan's stance on Nagorno-Karabakh. He said that his country would continue to stand by Pakistan on the Kashmir issue at all international fora. Earlier, Bayramov called on his Pakistani counterpart, Shah Mahmood Qureshi. Both leaders discussed bilateral ties, regional and international issues. Now, Britain has asked India to lift all restrictions in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. UK's Minister for Asia, Nigel Adams, said this while responding to a debate on Kashmir in the Westminster Hall of Parliament. Nigel Adams said undoubtedly the situation in Kashmir is of great concern to his government. He added the Kashmir dispute should be resolved according to wishes of Kashmiri people. Adams maintained that it would be wrong to not acknowledge the serious human rights concerns in the occupied valley. He said the situation in Kashmir remains an important issue for his government since the revocation of Article 370 by the Indian government. Adams said Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab also raised the issue with his counterpart during his visit to New Delhi last month. Moving on to India, protesting farmers on tractor trolleys have started heading for New Delhi to participate in the massive January 26th Republic Day protest. Farmer leaders marked the folk Lohri festival by lighting a massive fire by burning copies of the contentious new laws. Farmers in Punjab, Haryana and Delhi-Singhu border also burnt copies of the farm laws and chanted slogans against the Modi government. Around 250 million people are protesting the laws, saying the legislation makes them vulnerable to corporate exploitation. The next round of talks between the government and farmer unions is scheduled for January 15th. The United States has blacklisted 2 Iranian foundations controlled by Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. In a statement, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said they enabled Iran's elite to sustain a corrupt system of ownership. The sanctions by the U.S. Treasury also targeted the leaders and subsidiaries of these organizations. In a statement, the Treasury accused them of violating the rights of dissidents by confiscating property from opponents of the regime. The sanctions freeze any U.S. assets of those targeted and bar Americans from doing business with any of them. They are the latest action to reinforce the maximum pressure campaign on Iran pursued by the Trump administration. Iran says it is resuming its naval patrolling mission in the Red Sea. Iranian military commander Mohammad Hossein Bagheri said Tehran's naval vessels have been facing harassment in the sea. He said Tehran's armed forces will ensure the security of the country's tankers and commercial ships. He said Iran's defensive might in international waters is clearly visible. Iran also commissioned the country's largest ever military vessel during a 2-day short-range missile drill. Recently, Iran has increased its military activities in the Persian Gulf amid tensions with the United States. Now, the United Arab Emirates has ratified the visa exemption agreement with Israel. In a statement, Israel's foreign ministry said citizens will now be able to visit the UAE without a visa. Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi said the ratification is a central element of the implementation of many agreements being worked on these days with the Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco. The visa-free agreement will go into effect on February 12th. The UAE was originally expected to authorize the agreement in late December or early January, but deferred it. Israeli parliament ratified the visa waiver program for Emirati citizens in November last year. Moving on, in central Mali, 4 UN peacekeepers have been killed and 5 wounded after their convoy hit a roadside bomb. In a statement, the United Nations said the soldiers then came under attack by unidentified gunmen in the Timbuktu region. It said the 4 dead peacekeepers belonged to Ivory Coast, while the Ivory Coast Army says the UN workers were attacked by extremists, but no group has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. The UN mission in Mali has recorded 231 fatalities, making it the deadliest of the peacekeeping missions. Ethiopia says its army has killed 3 key leaders of the Tigray movement, including the country's former foreign minister, Seyum Mesfin. In a tweet, the government's emergency task force said the army also arrested 5 other party members. The 2 other killed leaders were former Federal Affairs Minister and ex-parliamentary chief. Earlier, Ethiopian forces killed 15 Tigray leaders and arrested 8, including former president of the region. Ethiopian police and military launched a manhunt for the leaders of Tigray People's Liberation Front after Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government declared victory over the movement in November after nearly a month of fighting. For the first time since the pandemic began, the world has reported more than 17,000 deaths in a single day. Globally, there are nearly 2 million fatalities and more than 92 million infections. China has reported its first virus-related death in 8 months, with daily cases at its highest since July. More on the pandemic in the following report.
The coronavirus is now claiming more lives every day than at any other point since it emerged in December 2019. Health officials say there needs to be a balance between COVID-19 testing and vaccinations around the world. In the U.S., the White House has once again suggested the existence of more transmissible strains in a weekly report to states. The death toll in the U.S. has topped 384,000 with more than 23 million infections. Meanwhile, healthcare systems in Canada and Mexico are struggling to keep up with the surge in cases. Bolivia has signed a contract with India's Serum Institute for 5 million doses of the AstraZeneca's vaccine.
The vaccine is part of the comprehensive solution that we have against the pandemic that has been threatening the country since December 2019, and which in our country has generated a lot of tears, pain, many families who have lost loved ones because there were precisely no structural response. Today, the national government, working for the health of Bolivian men and women, guarantees the vaccine with this contract.
Turkey has also approved the Chinese Sinovac vaccine for emergency use, clearing the way for mass inoculations from today. In more bad news for the UK, a study has found that patients in England's intensive care units are 20% more likely to die. Meanwhile, the EU has warned that the Britain-linked variant is having a significant impact on other countries, and its spread must be stopped at all costs. The World Health Organization has called upon wealthy nations to help bridge gaps in global vaccine distribution.
Going into a second year of this, it could even be tougher, given the transmission dynamics and some of the issues that we're seeing. So we need to, really focus on taking the positives, looking at what's worked in every country, and then transferring that knowledge to others.
A WHO team has arrived in China's central city of Wuhan to investigate the origins of the pandemic. Meanwhile, Japan has widened its state of emergency to cover more than half of its population as hospitals face pressure.
Whereas in Pakistan, 46 people have lost their lives to COVID-19, while 3,097 have tested positive over the past 24 hours. This takes the country's death toll to 10,818. The health ministry says there are more than 33,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. The ministry said out of over 511,000 countrywide cases, more than 467,000 people have recovered. The ministry said over 230,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province. Punjab has reported over 147,000 cases. And we'll be back with more news in detail after a short break. Stick around. We're back with more stories. In Bangladesh, at least 500 tents have been razed to the ground after a massive fire broke out at a Rohingya camp in Cox's Bazar. A refugee relief commissioner says some of the refugees were injured, but there was no loss of life. He said the relief commission is providing food and other services to the victims. He added the victims have been shifted to another place until the damaged tents are replaced. Meanwhile, Cox's Bazar officials said the cause of the fire is still being investigated. Bangladesh has unilaterally decided to send thousands of Rohingya refugees to a cyclone-prone island with an uncertain future. And Turkey has called on the United States to review its sanctions over the purchase of Russian S-400 defense systems. Foreign Minister Hulusi Akar told reporters that Ankara wants to resolve the dispute through talks. He called on Washington to stop using threatening language and sanctions against Ankara. Akar said it is difficult for Turkey to back off from the point Ankara has come to on the purchase of the systems. He said Ankara had no choice but to acquire the Russian system after no NATO ally offered Turkey favorable terms. Akar also said talks with Russia on acquiring a second consignment of the S-400 were continuing. Cuba has criticized the Trump administration for deliberately affecting the future of bilateral relations. This comes after Washington announced it was returning Havana to its list of state sponsors of terrorism. Cuba's foreign ministry said it does not recognize qualifying lists of countries issued by the State Department. It said the lists were unilateral and lacked international recognition.
It is a deliberate purpose, and that is detected from the moment this qualification was pronounced against our country. We insist that it is a slander of an insult against Cuba and that the Secretary of State deliberately lies when qualifying Cuba as a country sponsor of terrorism.
Ukraine says it will do everything in its power to hold accountable those accused of meddling in the U.S. election. The blacklisted include a parliamentarian, Oleksandr Dubinsky, from President Zelensky's ruling party. In a tweet, head of President Volodymyr Zelensky's office, Andriy Yermak, pledged to take action regardless of party affiliation. Earlier, the U.S. imposed sanctions on several Ukrainian individuals and entities alleging interference in the 2020 election. They were accused of involvement in a network associated with pro-Russian parliamentarian Andriy Derkach. In a statement, Derkach said those blacklisted were being punished for exposing alleged corruption. And climate activist Greta Thunberg is to feature on a set of stamps issued by Sweden's postal service. She will join a hall of fame of Swedish personalities, from footballer Zlatan Ibrahimovic to actress Greta Garbo. The stamps go on sale today and show Thunberg in her familiar yellow raincoat standing on a rocky coast looking out at a flock of birds. Postal authorities say they hope a small stamp can shine a light on the important issue of climate change. They say several million stamps will be issued and there will be many Gretas swirling around. Other stamps in the collection also have an environmental theme, including depictions of mountains, lakes, and forests. In Australia, enthusiasts of adventure sports in eastern New South Wales state are taking a leap of faith literally. Find out more in this report.
On a sunny summer afternoon, a dozen friends have gathered atop a cliff about 60 meters above the ocean near Carrarong, a town in New South Wales. They are united in their passion for a stomach-churning adventure sport, specifically rope jumping. 24-year-old Daisy Allen, upon leaping, free falls most of the way down toward the ocean surface.
Definitely at the beginning, there's a lot of fear that comes up, like your amygdala, your survival brain is really kicking in because you really, every part of you is trying to rationalize the safety aspect, because obviously you only jump because you know it's safe, right? So for me, it's a matter of just calming down, centering myself, really focusing in on my breathing, which is an aspect of this that I really love because it really forces me into that state of mindfulness and pure awareness.
After the leap and ensuing swing, Allen was hauled back up the cliff face on the rope by her friends at the top. They work in unison, about half a dozen, pulling the line together to bring their friend back up from the abyss below.
It's mostly about the people, because I can go to a beautiful place so easily alone, but the people make the big difference for me and who's involved. It's like an informal tribe. And there's so much trust and faith put in each other, and everyone's going through hardship in some way, and sharing that, it's just special. I don't know, can't put any more words to that.
Rope free flying or rope jumping was born in the 90s and grew in popularity in the past decade. In rope jumping, jumpers often install their ropes on cliffs, mountains, or skyscrapers, unlike the bungee jumping in which the jumper is connected to a large elastic cord.
What's cooking? Well, for most Europeans, the answer may very soon include worms roasted, poached, fried, or served with the sunny side up. More in this report.
Mealworms may soon find their way into Europe's pasta bowls and dinner dishes after becoming the first insect approved in the region as human food. The decision by the European Food Safety Agency paves the way for the yellow grubs to be used whole and dried in curries and other recipes, and as a flour to make biscuits, pasta, and bread.
The panel concluded that it's safe to consume this insect species, this product, under the proposed uses and use levels. And of course, if in the future there is a different novel food produced using Tenebrio molitor, the yellow mealworm larvae, as as a source.
Rich in protein, fat, and fiber, they are likely to be the first of many insects to be featured on Europeans' plates in the coming years. The European Food Safety Agency says it has received 156 applications for novel food safety assessments since 2018. These cover everything from algae-derived foods to an array of insect species.
I think it's interesting to say that we have received so far dossiers on different insect species and also on different formulations made using those insect species. And let's see what is going to happen in the future. But speaking of the present, we have already received a lot of dossiers on insects as novel food.
People across much of the world, including parts of Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, already enjoy tucking into insect bars, cricket burgers, and other grub-based foods. Once the European Commission ratifies ESFA's endorsement, Europe will join them. Overcoming the yuck factor may take its time, however.
On to business news. European stocks have edged up as investors monitor COVID-19 vaccine rollouts and the aftermath of U.S. President Donald Trump's impeachment. The Pan-European Stock 600 has risen close to 0.5%, with autos adding 1.5%. London's FTSE 100 and Italy's FTSE MIB have edged up marginally. The CAC 40 in Paris has gained as well, and Frankfurt's DAX has added nearly 0.5%. Earlier, most Asian bourses traded mixed, with Seoul's Kospi and mainland Chinese shares shedding, while Hong Kong, Australian and Japanese stocks gained. It's now time to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.